Yo! Welcome back to One More Mana. My name's Derek, and today we are getting right back into Ikoria. I said it would be a brief detour, and it was just a week, because we're coming right back, because there's a commander I am so excited about, in a color pairing I don't think I ever use. Don't quote me on that, but if I do use it, it's not very often. And today's deck tech is on Kelsien the Plague. Yeah, I don't go into Mardu much, but this commander has me really excited to maybe give it a try. Before we get too far into it, there's crazy cards in this deck, there's crazy cards in this set. So much of this set is broken, and if you want to use these broken cards to torture your friends in the nicest way possible, head on over to tcgplayer.com, use our affiliate link down below. Any cards you get through that link will help support the channel, help us get out more and better content. We really do appreciate the help. So getting into Kelsien. Kelsien is Mardu, just red, white, black, for a 2/2 that gets Vigilance and Haste to start, which is great. And this is just a throwback, because it's bringing back experience counters out of seemingly nowhere. And when you tap it, it's basically a Tim. It deals 1 damage to a creature you don't control, though. And whenever that creature dies this turn, you get an experience counter. Now, there's a lot of things going on here, and a few keys that we need to go by. One is going to be, we have to target creatures we don't control. So I love tokens, obviously, so when I first misread the card, I was like, yo, just fill my board with tokens, find some crazy shenanigans to just ping my whole board, get a bunch of experience counters, and have a party. Unfortunately, we do have to target our opponent's thing. So there's a ton of directions we can go. We can look into cards potentially that give our opponents tokens if that's the route we want to go. But I love this effect, because it not only rewards us for controlling the board, I do like being able to play control-ish type decks sometimes where you are taking care of threats, but Kelsien gives you such an awesome payoff over the course of the long game. It doesn't need you to explode and just completely oppress everyone's board states and never let them have creatures. Just threat assessment and dealing with threats throughout the course of the game will allow Kelsien to get big enough to be a threat in and of itself. You're going to see some Mardu good stuff. You're going to see some pinger tappy things. You're going to see some Voltron-ish stuff. You're going to see a lot of things, but they all fit together under this Kelsien shell in a way that I think will make this deck very fun and extremely versatile in a variety of board states. Jumping into the creatures, there's a couple that almost serve as little lieutenants that I just love in the deck. It's going to be something like an Avatar of Woe that can take advantage of all the tappy shenanigans that we have. Or something like a Goblin Sharpshooter that can benefit tremendously from getting Death Touch. It's great little cards to have. You don't want to have too many of these because it becomes too redundant, but they're great lieutenants essentially to have if our commander is unavailable. Disciple of Bolas and Harvester of Souls are going to be tremendous card draw in the deck. Disciple of Bolas, just because our commander can get so big, and there may be certain situations late game where we just need to draw cards. We're not worried about having our commander out at that point. Potentially, it's just a great backup plan to have. We got some other big creatures to take advantage of too. And Harvester of Souls, of all those creature die draw effects, Harvester of Souls is one of the few that rewards you for other people's creatures dying. And while the Grim Haruspex and those types of cards are great in most decks, because we can only ping our opponent's creatures, we really want the Harvester in this deck to take advantage with that card draw. Now, jumping into the artifacts, this might just be the most important category in the deck just because of how many roles these have to fill. We're running stuff like Gorgon Flail, Gorgon's Head, all that type of stuff, whatever can give Death Touch, Basilisk, Collar, those type of effects, because we need to give our commander Death Touch. And there's no better way to do this than with the equipment, just because even when our commander dies, it's gotten rid of, you still have the equipment out. We have a decent number of these effects, and it's something you got to kind of play with to get that sweet spot. I'm only running maybe a handful of these so far. You may find you need more, especially depending on how many tutors you run. Death Touch really is, to me, the key of the deck, making sure you can kill other people's creatures, because pinging for one is fine and dandy, but late game especially, if you're just poking people's massive creatures, it's not really doing a ton, and you're not progressing your game plan. So Death Touch is going to be huge in the deck, and I feel like equipment's the most resilient way to do that. But also stuff like Mage Right Stone and 1000-Year Elixir are almost just as important, because it allows us to get multiple taps in the same turn. Obviously, something like a Thornbite Staff is going to go silly if someone's playing a token deck. But all of these effects combined, if you can get these out in combination, you can start mowing down people's creatures and stacking up the experience counters. And that's the coolest thing about experience counters, and also the most frustrating if you're playing against them. All you need is one big board state with a Death Touch untap effect. All of a sudden, you can just pile up 5, 6, 7 experience counters. And for the rest of that game, pending some very, fringe play cards, you're going to have all of these experience counters, and you're going to have a massive commander that will be a threat, especially since it starts at 3 CMC. This is the type of commander that you, hopefully, fingers crossed, can get out throughout the entire course of the game. Having a card like a Shadow Spear is also, this might just be the MVP, and I feel like every deck I put this in is I always want it in my hand because it can get rid of hexproof, so that makes our commander that much more dangerous. It can get rid of indestructible, so that death touch is even more dangerous. This card is silly, not to mention that trample. If our commander gets big enough, this card single-handedly gets around a lot of the biggest problems this deck would otherwise have. And despite how much we love death touch and untapping, this might be, if you're running the Stoneforge Mystics of the world and stuff, which isn't necessary, but if you have them, this might be the first card I grab just because of how versatile it is and how much it just gets around the ways to fight the deck. And outside of that, we're in Mardu. Most of our ramp is going to be in this category. We don't need to go too crazy. Just having a bunch of signets, Arcane Signet to get a reprint, so stuff like that. Fill it with a bunch of mana rocks that are preferably 2 or less. If you have to throw some more that are bigger than that, not a huge deal. But because our commander is only 3 CMC, the deck in general is kind of low to the ground. All the 2 mana or less mana rocks you can get in, stuff them in there, and that's kind of be basically the ramp engine of the deck for the most part. Unfortunately, with Mardu, we don't have a ton of other choices. And then to immediately contradict myself as we jump into the enchantments, you see Smothering Tide there, the best ramp card in the deck. Ignore that. Most of the ramp is in the artifacts, but the enchantments still do fill some very important roles. I love Death Pits of Wrath. This is awesome. It basically is a pseudo giving your commander death touch. And while I said most of the time the equipment are the best way to do it, this might even be better because it's as an enchantment, so it's just going to sit there and it's always it's going to end up hurting us sometimes, but because our commander's a pinger, we're going to benefit from it way more than we're hurt by it. I also absolutely love Pestilence, and I literally just talked about this card last week and how much I loved it, but it's just as good in this deck. The thing I love about it is you get to hand pick how much damage you're dealing to everything. So as our commander gets huge with experience counters, we can ping something and then just do just the right number of damage to go ahead and kill that thing. Because again, the ping doesn't have to kill it, it just has to die that turn. So this is a great way, one, if we have a massive commander, wipe the rest of the board and just swing in to kill somebody, or 2, to make sure that we can kill threats with our commander and just throw some experience counters on top of it. Super versatile card, not to mention because we have that massive commander, we can keep Pestilence on the battlefield because we have at least that one creature out. Now, in the sorceries, we have a lot of our board wipes. And now, board wipes are important in every deck, but there are certain ones you do want to run in this. Stuff like the Ruinous Ultimatum is going to be amazing. Maybe even an Ingarrick's Wake. I didn't put that in here because I wanted some slightly cheaper board wipes, but that would honestly be really good in the deck. Blasphemous Act can be an all-star if your commander gets big enough with enough experience counters because it can survive it while watching the rest of the world burn. Some great effects to basically just always benefit you. Not to mention a card like Chandra's Ignition that's going to serve as a board wipe and, maybe some ways to win. We'll get to that later. But there's just some awesome versatile board wipes within Mardu that are going to allow us to basically have one-sided effects. Now, we are going to run the Wrath of Gods and stuff like that. We're not going to go all one-sided because we still want some low CMC board wipes for emergency situations. If you go all in on the Ingarrick's Wake, Ultimatum, and everything's a million mana board wipe, sometimes when you're in that emergency, you can't spend that mana and you need something low to the ground. So you want some versatility within that. I wouldn't go all the way on the expensive board wipes just for that one-sided effect. It's a little bit too much win more for me. So kind of having a balance within this category I think would be perfect. And as you see some of these cards, as you're peeking them, you're getting a little preview up to the game-winning step. And I think you're going to kind of get an idea of how I want to finish people off within this deck. Within the instance, we have so many options within Mardu for removal. You have swords if you want to run that. You can run Generous Gift, which is just a white beast within, which is phenomenal. One of my favorite removal spells because, again, you can get rid of lands and so many troublesome lands. Having a card like that, 3 mana instant speed, just phenomenal. Chaos Warp, you have so much versatile removal in this deck that can get rid of a variety of cards, variety of situations, and whether it's a Tuck effect or an Exile effect, you can get around so much. Mardu has a lot of kind of shortcomings, but removal definitely isn't one of them, and you can just pick and choose whichever one your favorites are. Now, in the land slots, there's actually some phenomenal lands. Normally, with most of the mana bases, I basically say, throw some basics, whatever. The land base isn't super important. This deck, actually, there's a few that are just crucial to the deck running well. Now, again, 3 colors. Run mostly basics. Don't worry about going crazy with fetches and all that type of stuff. For a 3-color mana base, you can run a lot of basics. But the non-basics that we do choose are hugely important because we want stuff like a Sunhome Fortress that'll give our commander double strike, again, if it gets big enough to the point where that's a threat. Or we can use Vault of the Archangel and use a land to give our commander Death Touch. I just talked about how good the equipments are, how hard they are to get rid of, how hard the enchantments are. How about lands? I say it every week. Nobody runs enough land destruction, so having a land that's giving your commander Death Touch and allowing this ping machine to go, that you really do feel safe and you feel like you got a great engine going. And to be completely honest, if someone does have that strip mine, it almost feels bad using it on that. Because most of the time you're holding that up for the Cabal Coffers, Gaia's Cradle, something super broken. This gets in that happy medium. Someone's going to feel bad, but they're going to have to get rid of it. Some other ones are going to be a Rogue's Passage. Giving our commander unblockable can be huge, again, late game. This is a type of control-y deck. You're trying to control the board. You want to make sure everybody else basically stays in check until you're ready to just alpha strike somebody, essentially, whether it's a big commander or one of these other effects. Rogue's Passage is great. I love to actually just hold this in my hand, because when people can see it on board, they can prepare. Even if you miss a land drop, sometimes I'd rather just hold that Rogue's Passage and wait for the right moment, almost using it like a spell you're casting, because you play it and activate it, and people just don't prepare for it. And then obviously stuff like Detection Tower and Arcane Lighthouse to also get around Hexproof. All these lands, one, they're not super expensive, and two, they are so important to the deck. It basically, in a lot of decks, I tend to run, in my mind, I don't know if there's any math behind it, I tend to want to max out at about 7 to 8 colorless mana sources in any deck that's 2 or more colors. Anything more than that, I feel like I have too many. And typically in decks, I just fill extra slots of that with more, Ghost Quarters and Tectonic Edges, that type of stuff, just because I have extra slots. This is jam-packed full. Every colorless land slot is something that I would not want to cut. And for most decks, I can't say that. Typically, I just throw in some good stuff lands to be able to deal with people's boards. This one, every slot is accounted for. It's just great having this many important effects on these lands because, hey, they're hard to remove, they're resilient, and it's going to make sure we can keep that engine going. And that's going to do it for all the categories. Now we're on to the game-winning step. How are we about to win the game in this deck? Now, Kelsien, it looks like in the card, flavor, lore-wise, probably super sneaky, hiding up in trees. And you know what? Our deck's kind of going to do a little bit of the same thing and have some explosive plays. Basically, games are going to play out where you do control the board, kill big threats, keep everything under control, and then out of nowhere, all of a sudden those experience counters got a little bigger than people expected, and you have some just ways to just basically put Death Touch onto a player with one of these arrows you're shooting at people and take people out. First way to win the game is going to probably be the hardest way with this commander specifically, and it's going to be just straight up regular commander damage. Now, this is a great way to win grindy games. We have ways to give trample, ways to give unblockable, different types of evasion that this deck needs. My favorite thing about Kelsien, and the part that I always forget, is that it has vigilance. The haste was so important because we didn't have to worry about haste enablers in this deck. It opened up so many slots not having to worry about haste enablers. But that vigilance is just as important because it's crazy the fact that you can just go ahead and on combat when he gets big, just start swinging at people and you can still get those tap effects. That was the part that I underrated on the card so much. And that's why combat damage is huge because even early game, you can poke in for 2, poke in for 3 or 4, and still be able to get your game plan going. Without that vigilance, combat damage would be so much harder in the deck. But with it, you can just gradually build it up, or again, Alpha Strike with the Rogue's Passage, and 21 experience, 19 experience counters, I guess it's a lot, but it's definitely doable, especially in a grindier game. Now, on to the second way to win the game, and let's say you're in that grindy game, and for whatever reason, you're not drawing that Rogue's Passage, you don't have that trample, you can't figure out how exactly to sneak this damage in. Well, the best way to do it is with something like a Fling Effect. Love Fling Effects. If you remember back to when I did the Kresh deck tech, it's kind of similar to that. Obviously, Kresh was more of getting something to like a 100 Kresh and flinging him. It's going to not quite be that ridiculous. You're going to have much more countable numbers, should I say, with Kelsien. But at the same time, you can still get Kelsien to the point where in a grindy game, it's enough to kill somebody. So whether you fling, whether you use Essence Harvest and use Loss of Life to get around things like Glacial Chasm, there's a number of different effects in here. I think I put 2 to 3-ish that are great backup plans. Some cases, you can just use it as removal, because other than Fling, the other 2 don't actually sack our commander. So whether it's the opponent losing life or throwing damage at a creature, it's great, because you can go ahead, keep your commander, and still get that effect for a pretty low mana investment. But these are just great. You want non-combat ways to win. And while I'm sure with the whole Tim sort of theme, there's some combo ways to go off, I really did like the idea of Kelsien just getting big and being able to punch people with it. If you haven't figured it out by now, that's kind of the way I play Magic. Is try to make things big and punch people with them. So that's how I wanted to do this, and I feel like there's some great backup effects to get around propagandas and glacial chasms and all those things that people are running to stop people like me from hitting them in the face with my giant creatures. And now, number 3, I think I'm just going to basically keep this number 3 slot. It's not even called the third way to win the game anymore. It's just how are we going to go to Phyrexia and find a new way to win? because it's all about Phyrexian, this third way to win the game, and we are making sure that infect gets in there for the win. The thing I love about infect in this deck is we have experience counters, so proliferate already matters. Didn't talk about Contagion Engine earlier, but this is a deck where one, that serves as a very, very useful board wipe, and two, we can proliferate. So proliferation is great, and I didn't go too far into the proliferate side of things with this commander, but we can maybe go further into there. But the infect by itself is going to be phenomenal. We're running that regular package of Glistening Oil, Tainted Strike, and Phyrexian. I love these cards. Tainted Strike is good in any situation because we can use it on opponents' creatures just to get some infect in throughout the game. But the other two are phenomenal. These are the situations where if you're in a meta where grindy games don't happen, you're dying faster, this is how you get around that. Getting your commander in this case to 10 power, so 8 experience counters, shouldn't be super hard. Now when we take into account some of the equipment we have and all these, getting in for 10 infect is not super difficult. And what I love is you can use this infect win con in such a variety of ways and a variety of speeds. If you have a faster meta, now this is not going to be a super competitive deck, clearly, but if you have a faster meta, you can go ahead, run as many untappy and death touch and infect effects, and basically just try to get this to happen as fast as possible. But if you want to slow it down and still love going to Phyrexian to try to get your win, then just run less untappy effects. Essentially make it so you're only getting an experience counter return, and basically make it a countdown until you can have enough experience counters to make infect matter. You can do it in a wide variety of ways. I know infect has that connotation of just out of nowhere super fast kill. This deck will actually let you use it considering, one, our commander does grow gradually for the most part, and two, I'm not running a lot of other infect stuff. It is a good way to get a little taste, play it fair infect so to speak, and adjust it to your meta in a way that will allow you to be competitive but not be overbearing and killing people too fast. And again, that vigilance comes into effect because when you swing at somebody with infect, they're probably going to be wanting to swing back. Having that vigilance to be able to sit back is great. This weird combination of Voltron Tim is something that seems like it's going to be so much fun. They definitely made it a little tougher on us with the whole only opponents creatures, but I think even working around that, this is going to be a hugely super fun deck. So that's going to do it for this week's deck tech. I really hope you all enjoyed it. After actually building all the decks and going through and trying to just, goldfish them, see what I like, Kelsien might be the one I'd be most excited about playing in paper of the new Ikoria commanders. It seems super cool and it's just so different. I can't think of many other decks where you get to do this Voltron, Tim, all this. It's doing so many things, and I feel like it can do them all well because of how many amazing things your commander does between the haste and the vigilance, and it's great. I really think it's going to be a super fun card, and especially with all the scary creatures going around a commander. You got Nyx Bloom Ancients running here, you got 2 lanes running over there. Having a removal on your commander in some playgroups might just be a necessary evil. As always, huge shout out to all the patrons. We love and appreciate y'all so much. With all the cards getting released, we might be in Ikoria for a little bit, so keep an eye open for more Ikoria commanders. I got some personal brews that are coming too. Just tons of stuff. But until then, I will see y'all next time.